So today, we're going to dive into one of the absolute biggest challenges of our time, the deep, deep connection between climate change and sustainable development. Let's get right into it.
And really, this is the question, isn't it? We're all trying to build a better world, one with a strong economy where people are treated fairly. But what happens when the very ground beneath our feet, our climate, is shifting and becoming less stable? How do you even begin to square that circle? Okay, so before we go any further, let's get on the same page about a key term. When you hear sustainable development, this is what we're talking about. It's this constant balancing act, like a three-legged stool. You need economic growth, you need social fairness, and you need environmental protection. Take one away, and the whole thing falls over. All right, now let's look at how these two massive forces, our desire for development and the reality of our changing climate, are right now on a collision course. This lays out the conflict so clearly. On the left, you've got these major climate threats. Think more frequent droughts, for example. And on the right, you have some of our most basic human goals, like ending hunger and ensuring everyone has clean water. You can literally draw a straight line from one side to the other. Climate change hits crop yields, which directly torpedoes our goal to end hunger. It creates water scarcity, which makes it infinitely harder to get clean water to everyone. These two things are in a tug of war.
So yeah, that's the pretty daunting problem. But what about the solutions? Well, a huge part of the answer lies in what a lot of people are calling the clean energy revolution. And when we say clean energy, we're really talking about these key technologies. You know them, solar panels, wind turbines, hydropower. The big deal with all of these is that they can generate power with minimal, and I mean minimal, greenhouse gas emissions, especially when you stack them up against the fossil fuels driving this whole warming problem in the first place.
But you know, this transition isn't quite so simple. And this chart just perfectly captures the paradox we're in. Look at that growth rate for renewables. It's fantastic. It is absolutely soaring. And yet our global dependence on fossil fuels, also incredibly high. Just look at China. It's the world leader in installing new solar and wind, which is amazing, but it also still relies on a massive amount of coal to power its economy. And on top of that economic reality, the whole thing can be pretty fragile. You get some geopolitical conflict that messes with the supply chains for solar panels, or a new government comes in and suddenly reverses climate policies. Those kinds of shocks can slam the brakes on the steady, long-term investment that is absolutely critical to see this thing through.
So clean energy is a massive piece of the puzzle, for sure, but it's not the only piece. We need to look at the entire carbon reduction toolkit we have at our disposal. So central to all of this is the idea of the carbon footprint. It's basically just a way to measure the total climate impact of, well, anything, an individual, a company, a country. And the key thing to remember is that we have got to shrink these footprints everywhere if we want to hit that critical target scientists have set, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
And here are three other major tools in that toolkit. First, just being smarter with the energy we already use, making our buildings and factories way more efficient. Second, developing some pretty sci-fi sounding tech, like carbon capture, which literally pulls CO2 out of the air. And third, completely reinventing how we get around, with things like electric vehicles and new low-carbon fuels.
But here's the thing, technology is only half the story. It doesn't just scale up on its own, it needs a push, it needs direction, and that's where governments come in. This is all about policies for the planet.
Now, on the world stage, the main event is the Paris Agreement. You can think of it like the global playbook. It's where almost every country on Earth comes together and says, okay, here's our plan to cut emissions, all in service of that shared goal of keeping warming well below 2 degrees. But, and this is a big but, that kind of international cooperation can be really delicate. When a huge country, a major emitter, decides to just walk away from an agreement or roll back its own policies, it can do serious damage to global momentum. It's kind of like a team sport, right? And it's really hard to win when one of your star players decides to just walk off the field. So how do countries actually turn those big global promises into action back home? Well, this table breaks down the main tools in their toolbox. They can put a price on carbon to make polluting more expensive. They can offer subsidies to make clean tech, like electric cars, cheaper for you and me. Or they can just set new rules, new standards that legally require things like our appliances to waste less energy. Okay. This brings us to a final, and frankly, absolutely critical piece of this whole story, the human side of it. We have to talk about justice and what this all means for our future. This is just the unavoidable, brutal truth of the matter.
The impacts of climate change, they are not spread out equally. It's the low-income communities, the developing nations, often the very people who contributed the least to the problem, who end up suffering the most from rising seas, from brutal weather, from failing farms. Why? Because they simply don't have the resources to adapt.
And that is exactly why any real, effective climate strategy has to have social justice baked right into its DNA. There's this idea called a just transition, and it's all about making sure that as we shift to a green economy, we are actively looking out for the most vulnerable groups, supporting workers whose jobs might change, and making damn sure that no one gets left behind in the process.
And this brings us right back to where we started. If there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. These are not two separate fights. They are the same fight. Effective climate action is sustainable development. When we invest in clean energy or build resilient infrastructure or support sustainable farming, we are hitting two birds with one stone. We're building a more stable climate and a more prosperous, fair world.
And so we're left with this. This is the final powerful question. We have the science, we have the technology, we even have the policy ideas. We know what to do. The real question isn't what anymore, it's if. Do we, as a global community, actually have the collective will to put these solutions into practice and build the future that we know is possible? That is the challenge.